Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, depending where you are joining us from. I am very excited to have you guys all in here and appreciating for some people who are coming back for our second presentation on LEMS Awareness Day. We have people slowly coming in, so I'm going to give us a minute or two before we start. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us.
We're happy to have everyone.
Yeah, but
And wearing yellow. Yes. I don't know how many recall. This was Madeline's idea. And it's a great idea. And we've had a number of people put pictures up of themselves in yellow. And you could do it anytime you wanted to, actually. And they go, "Why are you wearing that ugly yellow shirt?" And then you go, "It's because I have Lambert Eaton." And it's a
well,
conversation starter.
Price, I would like to say that I think you actually look very nice in your yellow. And with that,
Thank
Price,
you.
would you like to go ahead and give us a little intro?
Yes, I would. And for any of y'all that were on our earlier call, some of this will be redundant. I apologize for that, but we may have some new people that were not on our earlier um, uh, webinar. So, at any rate, first off, I want to thank everyone for attending uh, on behalf of the board. And I'm going to mention the other board members because they deserve the recognition. Julianne Kostelski is in Colorado. She's a founder, secretary, and board member. Lori Dunham is in Florida. She's our treasurer and a board member. Tracy Sharp is in Kentucky, a board member. Uh, Devin Lawson is in Montana and a board member. And you can kind of see him here on the call. He's kind of watching over us on the webinar. Harry, making sure we don't mess up. And then I'd be remiss if I did not mention Christina Patafio in New York. She's a founder, board member emeritus. She was on the start of all this. And so at any rate, we want to thank all the board members. We have a number of other volunteers we don't have time to mention, but we appreciate our volunteers as well. Um, we gave out 150 LIMS Awareness Day yellow pens. So we don't have any more of those. So if you got those, use those as conversation starters. We'll do it again next year. Um, let's see. Um, we have a new website I wanted to mention, and Madeline, our executive director there, took a big hand in that, and it's brand new. It hadn't been out very long. We have a lot of patient resources that we did not have previously, and we're continuing to add to that. And we're trying not to duplicate other resources that are available out there. So please, at any sometime, visit our website, limsfamily.org. Check out our patient resources. We're spending more effort, more money this year providing materials and things for our patient population than we have in the past. We're still talking to doctors and neurologists and clinicians, but we're really putting an emphasis this year on providing more to our patient population. So with that, Madeline, that's all I got. I'm turning it back to you.
Great, great. Well, just a quick little slideshow from us, and I apologize to those who joined us this morning, but I just wanted to provide a little bit more information about our association. We are a nonprofit patient advocacy organization who's dedicated solely to supporting the LEMS community. We have about 300 LEMS patients and caregivers worldwide, and we focus on building supportive and educational resources for the LEMS community. So we've been doing that for quite some time. With our patient chit chats. This year, we also launched our LEMS Learn, which is more of an educational webinar series. And then today is our first ever LEMS Awareness Day Virtual Summit. So we had Dr. Murney present this morning on ongoing research and emerging therapies in LEMS. And we're so excited to have Jodi Taub join us in just a couple minutes. But I just wanted to kind of Zoom webinar might be new for people. So We don't have a chat function, but you do have the ability to post questions and answers. And I pasted a copy of the bar down there. So please feel free to write in your questions. And then after the presentation, we will have about a 15-minute question and answer session. You do have the ability to use reactions. So you can give us an applause, thumbs up, heart. Um, Hopefully those are the actions that you'll be feeling in this presentation. Just a reminder that your camera and microphone are turned off. And if you are looking for those chances to have patient connection, just a reminder that our next patient chit chat will be on April 25th. That's a Saturday at 1 p.m. And with that, stop sharing, going to get ready and share our next presentation. All right. So I was really so pleased to connect with Jodi. She was a recommendation from Catalyst and one of our patient advocacy colleagues who have seen her at other presentations. But, really so much, we get a LEMS diagnosis and you go home and you think of how am I going to adjust my life to it? And, it was so great to get Dr. Mirany's presentation this morning. But, life with LEMS is just beyond a medical diagnosis. How do our relationships change? How do we continue to nurture friendships? So I'm so thankful that we're having this presentation today. But just a little bit more about Jodi and her amazing background. She's a private practice psychotherapist, a licensed clinical social worker with almost 30 decades of experience working in individual couples therapy, family and group therapy as well. She specializes in chronic illness and rare disease, and working with patients and caregivers in managing health anxiety, medical trauma, and the psychological impact of living with complex healthcare conditions. In addition to her clinical work, Jodi is a published writer, speaker, and researcher. She lectures nationally at many support groups, but has also spoken at many medical educational conferences and just continues to provide professional education in the chronic disease and rare disease community. She's the author of a new book, More Than a Patient, Building Relationships and Creating Meaningful Life with a Chronic Illness. So we are so pleased to have her present, and I'm really excited to introduce you all to Jodi. So Jodi, with that, I will share it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Madeline, for introducing me today. And one thing I will add, which is at the tail
Oh,
end of all of this, is that I'm a patient as well. So I'm a rare disease patient. And so not only do I live this professionally, but I live it personally as well. And I get it.
great.
Oops. We'll go up a bit.
Sorry, is it
Oh,
not? Um,
yeah, it's full screen. So we're cutting off just the tail end on the bottom, but
all right, let me see if I can help with that at all. I'm sorry, these are the technical.
no worries. So I can start our learning objectives today. So what are the things we're going to learn about? So we're going to understand why friendships often change when living with a rare disease, learning practical strategies for maintaining connection without over-explaining, develop language to communicate changing needs and inconsistent capabilities, explore ways to modify, not abandon friendships when energy is limited, gain tools for making new friendships that align with life with rare disease, and feeling validated and empowered to protect emotional well-being while nurturing meaningful relationships. Next slide. So why do friendships matter? What we know is that social connection is a core determinant of psychological well-being. Strong relationships are associated with improved mental and physical health, and loneliness is increased risk for depression and poorer health outcomes. So, many of us have a lot of different people in our support circle that might be caregivers, might be family members, but friends play an important role too. And learning how to maintain, connect, and make new friendships or navigate long-term friendships is important. So, what's the relational impact of rare disease? I always say that rare disease is different than other known diseases. And there's a reason for this. If somebody can't identify what the disease is and how it impacts us, it's harder for people to understand, it's harder for people to relate, and sometimes it leads to misunderstanding. So disruption and inconsistency and availability. This is what I call, our inconsistent capabilities. So there's times where we can do something. It might be certain tasks, like, going for a walk. And then other days, if we're having a flare or we're exhausted or tired, we just can't do it. And other people who don't live with rare healthcare conditions and don't live with LEMS may not understand that sometimes you can do the same thing and sometimes you just can't. Reduced participation in shared activities, managing your healthcare condition, the time that it takes to set up your appointments and to attend your appointments and attend all of your, all of the medical stuff that you have going on and what you do every day. It takes time, and sometimes we just don't have the free time. Increased misunderstanding and invalidation. So, especially with rare disease, when you don't know what something is, it's more likely that somebody's not only going to misunderstand us, but they're going to say things that may invalidate our experience. So shifts in identity and relational roles. So at one point, you may have had a friendship that was connected to work or connected to a recreational activity that you were able to once do, and now you can't. And so it's harder to connect when you're not having the original purpose of why you became friends. Friends may not know how to support you. Often we think that other people get it or they know how to show up, but everybody wants different things. And so we have to learn how to talk to our friends and talk to the people to show up in the ways that we want and in the ways that they are capable. Next slide. Unpredictability and capacity. So fluctuating symptoms impact our engagement. Energy is variable and not always controllable. Functioning may change from day to day, and relationships are often structured around consistency, and this creates the relational strain. So this is the hard part for many of us, is that we don't know how we're going to feel. We don't know what our appointments are going to look like. And our friends may want to set up something, and we get into that cycle of I'm either going to cancel, I don't want to cancel, our friends don't understand, somebody might get mad. So sometimes it's easier just not to engage with certain people who don't get it. And then it causes a strain. Next slide. Common relational challenges. So just like I said, canceling or modifying plans because you have to for health reasons. Difficulty sustaining reciprocal engagement, often misinterpreting limitations, and gradual reduction in contact. So if we have to cancel, sometimes what happens over time is people stop inviting us, or we feel that we don't want to, set somebody up for failure. So we decide, okay, I just can't commit to that. And because of that, people have a hard time understanding that. And then you disconnect. Next slide. Relational loss and adjustment. So some relationships may shift or dissolve. This happens for a lot of different reasons. People lose friendships or gain friendships based on where you are in life. So it may be that you're raising kids or you're at work and things are busy. And sometimes there's certain friendships that don't last the endurance. And particularly if you live with rare chronic illness and disease, this can really happen when you're not available in the same way and you just can't sometimes you can't relate. Changes may reflect capacity mismatch, not failure, and loss of friendship is a valid psychological experience. So even though there might be someone in your life that can no longer be supportive of you, it's a big deal, and it's important that you validate that loss and that grief. Clinical reframe. So relational change is an adaptation to alter capacity. So capacity equals commitment, reduced availability, maybe a lack of care, and relationships require recalibration. So one way to look at it is that how do we reframe or look at the way in which we can manage our friendships. So maybe I couldn't show up in the way that I did before, but maybe I can work on that with a friend. So maybe I can reframe it for myself and say, okay, I might not be able to meet you out on a Saturday night after a long flare, but maybe we can compromise and you can come over and we can watch a movie. So anyone living with a rare disease, you're going to have to recalibrate how you spend time, what it looks like, and that's okay. Next slide. Maintaining existing relationships. It's important to provide clear, concise updates. I know many of us, we live with our rare disease and we know that, okay, these are all the things that are going on. It's such a part of our everyday is to, think about how we're doing, thinking about our appointments. How did you do after your immunoglobulin therapy? There's lots of different stuff going on. And this is a part of our day to day. We don't necessarily attach an emotional attachment to it when you start getting used to your routine. But sometimes it's hard for other people to understand where you are, and it's helpful to give them a clear, concise update. Normalize variability. So letting your friends know, all right, this is what it looks like for me. Sometimes I feel like this, sometimes I feel like that. Sometimes I can show up, sometimes I can't, but this is kind of how it works for me. This is what I experience sometimes. This is what I need. Identify realistic ways to stay connected. So if you're someone who knows that you're going to have a week where you're going to have a lot of chronic fatigue, you may have a lot of appointments, you're not feeling as well, you have a flare, is there a way that you can still meet up or connect even if you can't do the original, even if you can't show up in the way you intended. So maybe you had a scheduled event to meet up and you suggest an alternative. Or if you have to cancel, to say, hey, by the way, I'm really sorry. Can we reschedule? Or maybe we can just catch up on a phone call. Prioritize emotionally supportive relationships. There are inevitably going to be people who aren't supportive and may not be the friends that you maintain. But there are going to be people that do. And sometimes it's people who surprise you. And those relationships are important to foster. Next slide. Communication strategies. So I was just talking a little bit about this, how we explain our healthcare to people who are able-bodied and may not understand. So use brief, consistent language, set expectations early, and reduce need for repeated explanation. So an example of this is my availability may change from day to day. Flexibility has helped me to stay engaged, and that goal is to maintain connection without over-explaining or overextending. When we over explain, sometimes you can feel a little bit of resentment, like, wait a second, I told you that. I thought I mentioned that I can't do XYZ, or this is what it looks like for me. And I think sometimes you have to be patient that even though it's top of mind for us, other people might forget. Next slide. So, reducing over explanation. Over explaining increases emotional burden. Not all relationships require full disclosure. Focus communication on function, not justification. So, you could get caught up when you're explaining what's going on and a justification of, okay, I have to do XYZ, or I'm not available during this time because you can reframe it by just making statements, making factual statements of this is how I do things, this is how it works, this is what I need. And that helps you feel like you're not defending the care that you need, but you're explaining what you do have. Next slide. Modifying connection. So often I will hear from patients that it's really hard to maintain relationships because it's another thing on their list. They just don't have time. But there's ways in which to maintain friendships by modifying it. So shorter interactions. So maybe you're not up for hanging out for an entire night with somebody, but maybe you say, hey, by the way, I may not be able to show up for dinner, but could we meet for a coffee? Right? Or if there's some sort of social engagement going on that's an obligation. It might be, a family event. and it's a holiday and it seems overwhelming. Like, how am I going to deal with that? And I don't know, I know I might not be feeling well or I'll be exhausted. You can let the person know, say, hey, I'm going to show up for this amount of the time, but I might need to leave early. So having flexible or tentative plans. So asking, hey, by the way, if I'm not feeling well, is it okay if I leave early? Finding alternative forms of engagement, just like I was saying earlier, through text or brief contact. Connection doesn't require consistency, it requires adaptation. Next slide. Discernment and boundaries. So I think it's important to take a look and sort of think about in a very intentional way, what are the friendships I want to nurture and which ones do I kind of let by the wayside right now? Like they're not as supportive of me right now. And so maybe I should focus on the ones that are. So evaluate which relationships are supportive versus depleting, reduce exposure to invalidating dynamics, and set and boundary and remember that boundaries support emotional regulation and stability. So what I mean by that is if you let somebody else know, okay, this is what I feel comfortable with, this is what I don't, it guides the other person so that they don't overstep your boundaries or your expectations. It gives them the guardrails. Often we feel like, oh, if I tell somebody what I need, it's I'm placing a demand on them. But you're actually giving them a way in which that they can show up and some expectations. And that way you don't feel resentful when they propose or do things that make you upset. And when I was talking a little bit about reducing exposure to invalidating dynamics, if you have a friend that just can't they have a hard time understanding your chronic healthcare condition, they have a hard time understanding LEMS, maybe that's the person that you limit those conversations about. So if they start asking you specific conversations about details of your healthcare, how you're maintaining appointments, what's going on, maybe you focus those conversations on something else and set some boundaries about what you tell them. Next slide. Emotional well-being. So emotional responses to relational change are expected. So it's not uncommon to experience guilt, grief related to shifting or lost relationships, frustration or disappointment. But not all roads lead to despair. And so I think it's important to have two things hold the truth at one time. So we can experience guilt, we can experience loss and frustration and disappointment with friends. That's going to inevitably happen when living with LEMS and living with a rare disease. But there also is resilience too. So it's remembering at the same time that we can adapt expectations within relationships. We can maintain connection in modified ways, which I talked about earlier, either through text, through phone calls, modified ways to spend time together. And we can prioritize emotionally supportive relationships, and we can protect our emotional energy that supports long-term well-being. Next slide. Making new friendships. So this is a skill set that I tell everybody we're all going to have to do. Part of the human experience is going through different life transitions. You have kids, you graduate from college, you're in your 20s, you're an empty nester, you're a senior citizen moving into a different phase in your life. Everyone is going to have to make new friends at some point and negotiate and learn how to do the skills. So I think it's something that I encourage people to enhance this skill set. So how do we make friendships while living with LEMS? So seek relationships that allow for flexibility, understanding of unpredictability, reduce pressure for consistency. So it may be that the new friendships that you do make actually might be easier because you're coming in with the expectation. Sometimes it's harder with people we've known for a while if we've gotten diagnosed later in life or if the diagnosis is hasn't been long term. Prioritize shared values over shared activities, emotional safety over frequency of interaction. So, really prioritizing the people that we know we might connect to and build connection gradually at a sustainable pace. So, when we're thinking about making new friendships, it could be that you decide, okay, I'm going to go to that new coffee shop and I'm going to go, or I'm going to go to Starbucks and I'm going to say something to somebody at the counter or, engage with the baristas. It doesn't mean that you have to, start a new activity and find people. You can do those things, but sometimes they're subtleties. Sometimes it's just opening up the door to conversations in your day-to-day life. Next slide. So before I get into making connections in the rare disease community, I also want to suggest that there's different ways that you can make friends. And so it can be subtle, just like I was saying, in your everyday interactions, going to a dog park with your dog or, seeing a parent at school or seeing somebody that you have a community relationship with. It could be at at a religious institution. But another way to make friends is through shared activities. So even if you can't participate in person, maybe you join a group online that something you're interested in. It could be a book club or a cooking class. But there's a lot of different ways to make friends. So making connections in rare disease community, seeking connection through patient and rare disease communities. Well, everybody showed up here today. So you made a pretty good step on that this is wonderful that you have the LEMS community here, and especially for the rare disease. And I know that I forget, I think it was the chit chat, but that sort of peer connection that you can gain access to people who have LEMS from all over. And knowing that you can meet up with other patients who just get it. So I also encourage people who live with rare disease to join a support group in person or virtual. So it could be condition specific organizations and events, could also be an online Facebook community or group. So it could be, that you participate in a chat with LEMS, but also you may decide that you want to get involved with other broader groups that that have patients with chronic healthcare conditions or caregivers. So it could be that you join another organization for rare disease. The benefit of online Facebook groups is it kind of gives you your leisure where you can pop in and pop out. So I'll hear people say, well, I showed up in that social media group, but I didn't agree with everybody, but you don't have to. So it may be that you join in and it's just nice sometimes and to see the shared experience. And there might be some people that you relate to, and then there might be some people that you don't. And it doesn't mean you need to respond. So it's wonderful to have that supportive community. And it's wonderful that LEMS is offering this full supportive community too, especially through rare disease. So building connection through shared purpose. So I encourage everyone to get involved. Get involved with the LEMS Foundation through advocacy, volunteering, awareness, and community initiatives. Benefits, shared understanding without explanation. Boy, is that a relief. Just to have other people who just get it and understand what you're going through, and you don't have to explain it. Validation of lived experience. So it feels good when you hear, wait a second, I am also on IVIG, or hey, I'm having a hard time right now. How are you balancing caregiving while you're living with a chronic healthcare condition? It's flexible, it's low pressure interaction, and start gradually. So observe before engaging. So I just talked about that on, the online forums. It may be that you just decide that you're going to read through some of the groups, or you participate in a peer group and you may not be ready to engage fully and tell your story, but start small with something you feel comfortable with. It doesn't mean you need to do all the things on this list, but choose something that works for you and participate at your own pace and choose supportive spaces. Next slide. Role of peer connection. I can't emphasize this enough. It's really important if you can engage in peer connection. You get shared experience, reduces isolation, it increases validation and emotional safety, and it supports coping and identity integration. So when you're able to connect with other peers who have LEMS or rare disease, it doesn't make you feel so alone. It doesn't make you feel, oh, wait a second, I used to do X, Y, and Z. I used to be, my identity used to be connected with work or connected to a different recreational activity. It allows you to connect where you are. Next slide. caregiving and social connection. So I can't end any presentation without thanking and talking about the importance of caregivers and social connection because they are just as important on our caregiver journey. So caregivers need to have friendships and to foster friendships too. Caregiving responsibilities reduce time and emotional availability for friendships, and social connection is often deprioritized due to competing demands. And I run several caregiver support groups, and I know how difficult it is for caregivers, both as patients and, or sorry, as partners and as parents, that they have this limited time, and often they feel guilty if they're doing other things. So it's important that you continue to make friends. Caregiver role is important, but you still need to have your life outside of your caregiving responsibilities. Um, and that's important because if we don't maintain our parts, so if we don't put our oxygen mask on first, then we resent caregiving, and you don't want to do that. And as patients, we don't want you to do that. We don't want to feel the burden that we're taking you away from your life and the things that you enjoy. So it can make people feel a reduced sense of self when outside of the caregiver, that all I'm doing is caregiving and I've lost my identity. So isolation can increase due to limited flexibility, emotional exhaustion, and difficulty relating to peers who are not in caregiving roles. Next slide. So maintaining and rebuilding friendships while caregiving. Maintaining friendships require intentional adaptation. So strategies can include prioritizing a small, reliable support network, communicating availability clearly and realistically, engaging in flexible, low-demand forms of connection. Rebuilding connection may involve reaching out in manageable ways, accepting modified expectations of friendship, focusing on relationships that allow flexibility and understanding. Supportive relationships reduce isolation and support caregiver well-being. Next slide. So as we end the presentation and get ready for Q&A, the key takeaways that I wanted everyone to have is that relational changes are expected in chronic illness. It's inevitable that our relationships are going to change, but connection can be maintained through adaptation. Communication reduces misunderstanding. Boundaries support emotional well-being, and meaningful relationships remain possible. Next slide. And these are my references. All right, I'm ready for some Q&A. Oh,
Well, I've got one for you, Jody.
great.
What do you do? And this happened to me. I kind of got into a toxic relationship with someone uh, shortly after being diagnosed. What are some tips on how to extricate yourself from a toxic relationship, which you know is not providing you with what you need, the support, the understanding that you need? You're pretty entangled with this person, but it hadn't worked out.
That's a fantastic question. And so when you're saying extricate, do you mean this is a person that you no longer want to be friends with?
I mean, when you find out that somebody's not to your benefit anymore, they're not supportive of you anymore, then you need to get yourself out of that situation. Uh,
Great. Yep. So
Sometimes maybe if it's a spouse or a significant other, maybe you cannot. But in my particular case, that wasn't the case. But it could be the case where that person could be your spouse for.
So I'm going to answer this one. Friendships are a choice, right? So when we get into spouses or significant others or family members or people who are in our lives that we need to maintain. That's one category. But for this category of someone that you know that's not supportive, that you know you don't want to maintain that relationship with, is knowing your non-negotiables, right? So a non-negotiable will be if a person is not supportive of your relationship and it's a friendship that you don't need to maintain, it's not a friendship that you need. And you can decide how you want to handle that. You can let the other person know and say, listen, like I I know that we've been friends for a long time, or I know that we've been friends, for XYZ, but I'm going to take some time and some space from you because the things that you've said to me recently have not been supportive and they've been painful and I need to focus on some other things. So there's lots of different ways that you can say it, but I think the first step is acknowledging that if a person isn't supportive, they're toxic, they don't feel like a safe person and something that you want to a friendship that you want to maintain, you don't have to. And you can then choose how you want to do that. Now, there's other friendships that you may come back to and say, hey, you know what? I might want to pause on this friendship and maybe I put some distance in, and this is a person who I'm going to give the opportunity to learn and to repair and see if we can do that. But there's some people that we just won't be able to do that with. And that's protecting your own boundaries and absolutely is acceptable.
Great. Thank you, Jody, so much. We're still waiting just for some clarifying questions, just to make sure I'm answering them correctly. But I had some questions myself as well. And throughout your presentation, I kind of focused on two emotions, and that was guilt and resentfulness. And I was just wondering, like, when you're having that friendship and you're, feeling guilty for canceling plans or having to, have another conversation about your, condition, your rare disease. What is like the practice that you have or any tips that you can share of like, how do you get yourself out of that mindset?
I think part of it is the acceptance of what I call inconsistent capabilities. So sometimes you can do something, sometimes you can't. And the first step is acceptance. That is your health, and what you mean and how you maintain your health is first and foremost, because everything else doesn't matter if you're not able to do that. And when you're able to validate that this is how I lead my life, this protects my own health care, this allows me then to have the space if I, limit my time or I protect my health and choose plans around that, it actually will give me more social time by doing that. So I think that's the first part. And the second part is the communication around it, is really sort of fostering those expectations with your friends so that over time what will happen is they get used to those conversations and they get used to your boundaries and how you spend time together, that it doesn't always become this tangle.
Yep. And then, we also talked about, that change in focus of kind of like similar to what you were just saying, like, with guilt and resentfulness and when you're feeling, those feelings, what have you found that has been helpful? Like, is there something that you do or you listen to or something that kind of helps change your mindset a little bit? Or is it like meditation and just doing some self-talk? Like what kind of helps you improve your mood, if I can ask that? Yeah.
Okay. So just to clarify, what you're talking about is not frustration in a particular relationship, but what are some like coping strategies to improve?
Yeah, like, you're feeling this guiltfulness, you're having one of those, just bad days of like, why me? Why am I dealing with this? It's hard for me to have friendships. What have you found to be helpful in the communities that you've reached out to or other patients just to kind of help change the mindset, if you will?
Okay. So in terms of coping strategies, I always say it's not one size fits all. There's lots of things that you can do and lots of things that you can do in the moment. So, physical movement, any type of movement, going for a walk, getting outside. We know that getting outside in nature is one of the best things that we can do for brain integration. So what I mean by that is when you just go outside, even if it's in your backyard or, if you're in your city, it's walking out your front door, but it forces you to sort of look around at your surroundings and it grounds you. When we talk about physical movement, which is one of the best ways that you can activate your nervous system when you get upset, when you get that fight or flight, resentment, anger, physical health response, is that you can move. Now, this doesn't mean we can always go for a walk, right? Like you might be in the middle of your day and you can't do that, but maybe you can go do laundry. Maybe you can get a task done and move around. Or if you're in public, you're in a workspace or you're at a medical appointment, maybe you need to like get up and go to the bathroom for a moment and just take a moment and take a pause on that. Other examples include creative expression. So doing something that's creative, it may be popping in a podcast or listening to music. Those are all different ways to get us out of out of the analytical mode network where we are just thinking about, what's going on, what I'm upset about, and to sort of break that cycle.
Right. Those are wonderful. And I know Devin, one of our other co-hosts, has a question for you as well.
Mine kind of goes along with what Madeline was saying, and specifically, like, how do I deal with the disappointment when I have to like cancel plans? Like, um, specifically that because I'm just always so overwhelmed with disappointment in myself whenever I have to cancel or change plans. So I was just wondering if you could comment specifically on that, please.
Yes, so there's a couple things. One, it's inevitable. I think we're always going to live with that, right? It's always going to be a risk assessment because it is. That's what you're doing is the risk assessment of like, do I do this at the expense of something else? So I think one is acknowledging that, but what we want to do is make it so that it's less intense, right? So that it's not always that I feel, this intense feeling of like guilt and remorse or this ambivalence that sometimes I will feel that and sometimes I won't. Plan ahead. So think about the things that are really like non-negotiables. Like there's no way, we were talking a little bit earlier, like there's no way I'm skipping out on my IVIG, right? Like I have my infusion. I have to go to that tomorrow. I'm not going to say, okay, I'm going to work tomorrow. Or I'm going to have this plan. I know that I have to do my medical appointment tomorrow. Um, know your non-negotiables also around how you're feeling. So if you can plan ahead and know, wait a second, I have a really busy week and I know by the end of the week I'm going to be really tired. Maybe I limit what I do so I don't overextend myself. So if you know you have a ton of appointments that week, a lot of obligations, and then you commit to a social plan at the end of the week, inevitably you may not be able to do it. So but you might be able to do that on an off week. So I think planning ahead so you don't set yourself up to fail, having the conversation with the important people around you. So, that conversation may be with a significant other, your caregiver, your kids. This is what I think I might be able to do this week. This is kind of what I'm thinking. And I kind of want to piggyback with you so I don't feel badly. We're both on the same page for what I can do. And setting that up also too and having those conversations sets you up for friendship too, because you may have a social obligation with a group of friends or people and if you're checking in with that person, that trusted person, hey, should I do that? Sometimes it gives you the confirmation and the validation that, you know what, you've kind of had a long week. It's okay to do that.
Great. Thank you. Jodi, and Price just sent in a question too, and we'll kind of use this as one of our last questions, but I'd also love for you to just chat briefly about your book. But, Price mentioned that LEMS is so up and down.
Yeah.
And, when you were talking to Devin, you so eloquently put kind of those feelings. And he was just wondering, how do I not feel constantly so down about my ability to do things or inability to do things?
It's focusing on the things that you can. Because I
Hmm.
think one of the things that we do is we focus on all the things that we can't do and trying to focus in and remind yourself of the things that you can. Like, okay, so I'll hear, from patients often and experience myself, it's easy to get into that negative thoughts spiral, right? Like I'm thinking about it. So every day, you know, focus on that gratitude. Okay, what are the things that I actually still can do? How do I still show up for people? Like, okay, I still am able to connect with this person. These are my skill sets that are still valuable. Perfect example of this is, many of us become chronic illness case managers. And so we learn how to navigate insurance companies and how to manage all of these things instead of looking at it, as, we all hate doing all of this. Nobody wants to do that. But I also remind people like, oh, wait a second, this skill set can be really helpful. And so I'm able to use those skills and help a family member or a friend when they're navigating the medical healthcare system. So it's reminders of the gratitude and reminders of our abilities, and you have to keep reminding yourself. And it may be that you have to write it down. You may not feel that way, but I think every day that you do that and focus on that and not getting caught in the negative cycle, it helps.
That's a great way to reframe it. And, it is an amazing skill set that people often, are looking for help with. Actually, just one other question before I ask you about your book. And, you shared with us earlier that you've been a rare disease patient for 20 years now. And I was just wondering, what would you go back to yourself, like, very fresh into your diagnosis, and what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, so I have a rare genetic and hereditary disease that I've had my whole life, but I was diagnosed 20
Oh,
years
I'm
ago.
sorry.
And
Yeah.
no, it's important because I want to explain it.
Yeah.
I know that's probably the case for many people here today. And I think at that moment of time, at that point, you'll know my age. I was 30 and I was thinking about, oh gosh, what are all the things that I won't be able to do, right? And I was thinking about the perception of other people. And if I were to go back in time, I would let myself know that I'm going to find purpose and meaning with this. Like, I'm going to find a way that I'm going to make sure that my disease not only, yes, it's going to take certain things away from me, but I'm going to find a way to make purpose. And that's part of why, I ended up helping the people that I did, but also that, it's okay. You're going to be okay. You will figure these things out. And just because you have this disease doesn't mean that you're not going to have other ways in which you're going to be able to do things. I would have never known 20 years ago that I could like have all of these online relationships. I would be able to like modify my work and be able to, work from home. And so there's always possibility.
That's a great message. And, as the executive director of the LEMS Family Association, I really appreciated your plug for getting involved with the organization, whether through volunteer or advocacy, because, I mean, you so perfectly put it. There's a way to take your diagnosis and put it towards a purpose. So I appreciated that plug. And speaking of, a great accomplishment that you did and putting your diagnosis to purpose, I would love for you just to share with everyone about your book, if you don't mind.
Yes. So this is part of my purpose. And meaning making. But one of the so my book recently came out, and one of the things that I really wanted to do, speaking of what I would give as a younger self, is I wish at that time that I had a patient handbook that told me about how to navigate the different relationships in my life. And one of the things that I have thought was so important was that we all often focus when we think about chronic healthcare conditions and we think about rare disease, we focus in either on our physical healthcare condition. And then when we look at the mental health and the psychological impact, we look at ourselves. What we don't look at is the quality of our relationships and how to maintain those various relationships. So, what I did in my book is I broke down the various relationships in our lives. So, friendships, caregivers, partners, caregivers, patients, pets, medical relationships, mental health, and dating. And I provided practical clinical based strategies to utilize that you can use and turn to that page and answer some of the questions some of the people asked today. But I wanted to do it from the lens of, yes, I wanted to provide the clinical information, but also from a personal perspective. So I really hadn't found a book that I've seen in chronic healthcare conditions where it isn't just about your personal experience or it's just about the clinical work that you do. I tried to weave both of those things in to walk you along the journey.
That's great and a much needed resource. And Price, I see you're coming off on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, she mentioned pets, and I love my pets. I've got two cats, but I grew up with cats and dogs, and then we had a bird at one time. And can you just spend a couple of minutes and, I mean, my pets mean a lot to me because I don't have a live-in caregiver. I try to take care of myself. We try to stay autonomous and independent as long as we possibly can. Uh, what's your thought on pets? I love my pets.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it in my book because I know the value of how therapeutic it is to have a pet, and for all the, losses that we do have, like they're your constant companion, and especially when I think it's really important. And if you have the opportunity and you are a pet person, they can, pets are family. And and I can't recommend it enough. My Mr. Beetle, my little Chihuahua, passed away, but I paid homage to him in my book and called him my nurse, and the importance of like, and sometimes I also think the other thing too, when you're not feeling well, it's just like your pet kind of cuddles up with you and you get those natural endorphins, and, pets make your house a home.
Well, when Bucky runs up and jumps into my chest and starts purring, it makes me happy.
It's
And
pure joy.
it, it's unconditional love, and I can't think of much better than that.
All right. Well, and we did just get one question into the chat, so I do want to ask, and I apologize for running a couple minutes over, but just tips on dating um, that you could share with us.
Sure. One of the things I actually put in my book is like a 3 point talking point, but th one of the things I always say is think about your own narrative, how to tell, when to tell, who's the right person to tell. So when you prep in advance, then you know what you want to say. So I think it's important to have quick talking points, right? Like, and your quick boundaries. So there are some people who are very comfortable revealing their healthcare condition early and they're fine talking about it. And there are other people who aren't. And so know your own boundaries with that, know your own narrative. When you tell somebody about, I could go in and be like, I have primary immunodeficiency disease, and they would look at me with three heads. But if I said, hey, I have a rare blood disease and it causes XYZ, and this is how it impacts me when I'm ready to share that, it allows people to understand a little bit about that. Because it's hard when you have a rare disease, right? Because when you're dating, you're telling somebody about your disease that they know nothing about. So you have to share a little bit more. So think about when you're going to do that and who is the right person to tell. So it may be, on your first or second date, not right, but it might be someone that you really connect to. You might have a moment and that's the right person. So the last thing I say about this with dating, as I know many people have been, you know, in long-term relationships who have rare disease, there is somebody out there. Look for people who, are caregiving, who have strong attachments, people who are not consistent, you can't count on. That's not going to be somebody you're going to want to date. And you can vet. Chronic living with a rare chronic healthcare condition allows you to vet for the positive attributes that make somebody a good, secure partner.
That's a really good point.
And you deserve to be in a relationship, and we all can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to thank you so much for spending your Monday night with us and just sharing so many words of wisdom and I think really helpful. It is just, it's wonderful. So we really appreciate this presentation. And about the book, if people wanted to look for a copy, where is the best way for them to find one?
Sure, it's on a lot of small booksellers, but it's on two big ones called Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and the ebook is being sponsored for I think 99 cents are free for the first year. So it's accessible to everybody.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you, and I think you shared some really meaningful conversation that I think we could probably discuss further at our patient chit chat. I'm sure these are going to be many themes that are coming up. So, thank you everyone for celebrating LEMS Awareness Day with us, and we really appreciate you spending your time with us tonight, Jodi. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.